Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing well. So in today's video, it's going to be not a different video, but just like a very transparent video for me. I feel like because of shame, embarrassment, and just straight up trauma memory response, I didn't really want to share this testimony, but God has been really pushing me to do this, and I feel like in this time where people need the truth, they need transparency, and they need to know that they're not alone, I feel like it's a time that maybe this can help someone. So I'm going to be sharing my testimony today of how God's brought me through a lot. He's brought me through sexual sin, He's brought me through depression, anxiety, He's brought me through sleep paralysis, and I'll just be sharing amongst other things, but those are the main things I'll be focusing on in today's video. I've got notes on my phone, so if you see me looking down or reading, it's because I didn't want to forget anything. And obviously because I'm a bit nervous, I need to make sure that I'm not rambling and I'm getting to the point. Just to give like a brief overview, I was raised in a household where we were aware of God-fearing and stuff. Like, we went to church most Sundays, if not every Sunday, and the Wednesday Bible study and the Sunday evening service. Like, I have a memory of just painting shoes and frilly socks. If you lot know, then you lot know, but that's literally my childhood, was them church clothes and like sitting in pews and that. Like, people would mention like Jesus and the Holy Spirit and gifts, prophecy, different things like that, but I didn't actually know what they meant. So I just grew up being aware of those terms without actually having that understanding behind them. So I was aware, but I wasn't completely aware. So I think with that being said, that meant that I took Jesus for granted. I took being brought into a Christian environment, or I'd say believers environment, I took for granted, because there was groundwork and a level of searching that I never had to do because I kind of was set up from the beginning. There's a lot of things that I was naive to because I was like, yeah, I know who God is, so anything that I do afterwards is kind of irrelevant because I already kind of know what to do. Like, you just say sorry and then it's done. Like, you do what you're doing. And because of the environment that I was in, kind of like culturally, it was like the generation before us, it was a thing where you're only finding out people's business and mistakes like way later on in life, where it had to be some big blow up and everyone would kick off, and you know what I mean. So it was never a case of, this is the mistakes that we made, this is what we learned, this is why you shouldn't do XYZ, because this is what it means physically, this is what it means spiritually, and this is what it does to you, and this is what it does to people around you. It was never A plus B is C. It was always A divided by B minus M. Sometimes it equals to C and sometimes it's D, and if you minus F, like, it was just a lot for me to be able to adequately explain how I got to the point where I fully surrendered my life to Christ. I have to go back to the beginning. Like, this was an exercise for me, because I didn't think about how far God had brought me until I actually had to think about it. I think a lot of people, when they experience something traumatic, they don't spend time thinking about how they got there until it's time to heal from it. I think that was the main reason why I didn't think about it. Like, for me, it was just a waste of energy. I'm like, all I know is that it was painful, and that's pretty much it. Like, we don't need to keep revisiting pain to, like, you know, open old wounds. It just didn't make sense to me. But now obviously I understand that revealing that helps others to heal, and it displays how good God actually is and the capability that He has to heal and overcome if you actually trust Him to do His job in your life. So going back to the beginning, I think my first traumatic experience was when I was at school. I was 6 years old, and kids are kids, innit? And thinking back, I'm like, right, like, school was actually trash. So yeah, I was 6 years old, and a boy thought it was jokes to basically flash his genitals. And me being 6 years old, I'm like, okay, like, that doesn't mean anything, and all I know is that I don't have one of those. So I'm like, oh, that's different. But that planted the seed. Like from then, like Satan was like, yeah, I'm exposing slowly. I think I was listening to a sermon, or basically like it's like adding a little bit of poison to water to the point where you can't, and it's increased, the poison is increased slowly to the point where you can't tell the difference in taste, and it's like pruning you to ingest poison basically. So I feel like that was the first instance where it was just gonna keep building on. From then, like there wasn't really anything that I remember. Yeah, like childhood was different. Like it wasn't completely terrible, but growing up, like being below the poverty line and things like that, not realizing that you were, and until you're thinking about it in adult life. There was a lot of our 7 and a 2 bedroom flat for the majority of my childhood. Just giving you guys context, like it was very tight and restricted, rigid, loving different ways, but more stress than freedom, if that makes any sense. So I kind of got used to an anxious environment and stressful situations. Now fast forward to, I'm 12 years old and I'm in primary school. Some schools had already, like when you're 12, like in year 7, some are joined to high schools. My primary school still had a year 7, not shortly after they got rid of that, and we had just got a new lab of computers. Now if you're a 90s kid, you already know, like we didn't start school with computers. Like it was introduced into our curriculum as we were progressing through key stages. These times before, we had to share computers and do work. Now there's like 20 something odd computers, and my class was small, so everyone had their own computer. Like no one had to share. Everyone would run and pick the corner computer, because obviously that had the blind spot and you could always see the teacher coming into the room. There was a group of them, like say 3 or 4 boys, like they'd come to school saying, yeah, I found this website, like I was at my cousin's house and it might not be blocked, because they always blocked all the good games. Like I don't know if you lot remember Miniclip, they blocked that. Everything, all the lit games, like they blocked it. So they found this website that basically wasn't blocked, but obviously without the safety blocks that opens the window for everything to come in, not just the kosher games but the explicit games as well. So they must have been clicking through, and they found one of these really like explicit sexual games, and obviously they were playing it. Because everyone started to hold on, thinking, wow, like what's everyone, what's everyone looking at? Lo and behold, they're playing one of these really like interactive, like explicit games. I'm like, whoa, like I didn't even know that was a thing, and that just watered the seed that had already been planted when I was 6, of like getting used to the idea of like nudity in a very perverted way. Like it's tainted the way I think about sex and intimacy before I even realized what it was. After that, my curiosity was already piqued, so that I kind of carried that with me to high school. The first year and a bit of high school, I actually went to a girls' school. So from age like 13 to 14 and a half, I went to a complete girls' school. Girls are a different breed. Like when you concentrate too much hormones in the same place, it's nothing but stress. And because girls are like, a lot of them being teenagers, hormones and over emotional, it was just a lot of things. And back then, when I didn't know what discernment was, you would discern something and think it was you. Like you felt the homosexuality everywhere. I don't know if you guys would know, but it was a stereotype that if you went to a girls' school, that it was just filled with bare lesbians, because there's no mandems to like disperse the energy, like if that makes any sense. So that was kind of what I got used to and introduced to. You know how like pre-iPhone, smartphone, Blackberries, all that, it would be like some any tinny phone, but we had Bluetooth, so that's how we would send pictures, group stuff. It would be via Bluetooth. So now it's a thing where everyone's getting these new phones and discovering the capabilities of what it can actually do. But the thing is, with technology, like it spread like wildfire. I don't know what Hollywood was going through, but like all celebrities wanted to do nude pictures and then they'll get leaked or whatever. So theirs are getting leaked, and then by the time they get down to us, they're being sent between girls, even from boys' schools. Like they're getting sent on the buses in the morning, and then by the time school's over, they're getting swapped again. It's just a constant cycle. One of those must have got sent around like our school, like a few, and even some of the girls that went to my school went and go and copy these foolish celebrities of taking pictures of themselves and sending them around. So they obviously like got sent around bare people's phones. I got exposed to that as well. So it was kind of like, yeah, this is normal. Like, it's not that the human body is normal, but to be exposed in that kind of way, that perverted way, is what's not normal. But obviously being young, not being able to now tell the difference, because the seeds has slowly been like planted over a few years now. It's like, oh well, everyone else is doing it, or everyone thinks this is jokes. Like, it's calm, like everyone's doing it, like it's normal. My relationship with God at this point was weak. Like I said, I was going church, but I didn't know the point of going to church. Like, it just seemed like the thing to do. Like on a Sunday, like in a black Jamaican household, it was, you go to school Monday to Friday, Saturday you clean the house, and Sunday you go to church, and then you cook some dinner for ages. You iron your uniform and you do it all over again. That was it. That was the regimen. I thought everyone did that. Like, we're taught to pray, but not like the relationship with God where during the week, like, you can talk to him about anything. Like, he's right there. Like, you could just ask him. Things like that. It wasn't really like that. There was just a lot that I didn't know that I thought I did. But you have to want to know God to do this Christian walk properly. And I was just doing surface level, like, oh yeah, you'd say benediction, and when church is about to finish, like, everyone who hasn't given their life to Christ, like, you'd say the prayer with all the other new believers, like, yeah, I don't need that, like, I'm already saved, like, it's calm. So that was basically where my relationship with God was at that moment. Like, it was mere surface level, like, if that. I wouldn't even class myself as saved. I had the title Christian, but I wasn't a believer, like, by definition, biblically. I now, from being in a complete girls' school, I now moved to a mixed school when I was 14 years old, so year 9. And this was a whole nother, like, ball game, because I feel like between 14 and 17 is where the most growth happens when you're a youth. Like, everyone's trying to discover who they are, like, it's GCSEs, it's all them things there, so it's again stressful. So now this is a new upgrade of phones. Now we're on BBM and iPhone 4. It's looking, well, HD at the time, it was like HD, so now it's upgraded to people sending videos of girls even that went to our school, people losing their virginity, people having abortions. Like, it was mad. These times I even went to a Christian school. Don't let that fool you. Like, in my opinion, it's worse, because I feel like the devil works extra hard in those kind of environments, because it's like, yeah, you lot are professing this, but the mess in the actual school, like, it's mad. It's a new, different level. And because I've been to both, I can make that comparison. Like, it's bad when it's like just a normal public school, but when it's a church school, I feel like because more people are naive, because they're thinking, no, those things don't go on because it's a Christian school, when it actually does put, like, this stuff goes on because I was in it. It's true. So just to give you some context, I was actually baptized at 14. I think I was 14. Baptized at 14. So now I'm starting to lean into wanting to know God, wanting to understand my Bible, wanting to understand what Jesus actually did, and not just hearing about it every Easter and every Christmas. Like, I wanted to know who everyone said that this Jesus was. Like, even when I'd hear my nana, she would pray, and I'm like, who is she talking to? Like, she's given her whole life to this person. I don't even know who that is. Like, that love and energy that I see her give, like, without fail, like, I want to know who that is. That's when I'd say, like, I started trying. I was still, like, lukewarm, but that's kind of when the journey began. Like, yeah, I want to kind of take God seriously, because this life is, like, there's got to be more. And amongst other stuff, like, also around this time, like, shortly after I was baptized, we didn't actually have a church home, because there was a whole lot of different beef going on. So I'd actually, from childhood, I'd changed churches, moved to a different branch of the same kind of, like, I say governing body, like, there's different like church denominations, but we're in the same denomination, just moved to a different branch. So we've moved now, got baptized, and then things happened in that church. So we were basically, I'd say, church homeless for about, just over 2 years. Didn't go to church, didn't even mention it. Left me spiritually hungry, not knowing what to do or where to go, and that was literally it. So that, for me, I think not having a foundation prior and then going into, like, basically spiritual drought made me open to receive basically anything. And I think to my detriment, like when you have that hunger but it's filled with the wrong thing, you're finished. So this school, from, because I stayed there for 6 forms, so from 14 to 18, high school was okay. Like if I gave it an overall experience, it was just all right. Like I was black in a predominantly white school with a white area, and there was black people, but they were like the rowdy man, like they were rowdy, and I couldn't subscribe to that. So I was already like different, but I just felt even more left out because I'm like, I'm not black enough for these black lot, but I'm not white enough or educated enough for these basically white lot, and the in between, like it just didn't run. And being a creative as well, like I could do my work, but there was always like, it always felt like it was a block, like I couldn't reach past a certain point because at the end of the day I was black and I was female. So just a sad reality. Like now I know there's options and there's ways to get around this, but being 14, 15, 16, you don't know what that is. You just do your best with what you're dealt, and until you're educated otherwise, this is the way you believe that things are. Yeah, I felt different. I wasn't girly enough for the girls, but I wasn't boyish enough. Like I'm not a boy, so obviously there's only so much I can do. Like where really is that going? So I wasn't into that flirting thing because I was already socially awkward, so it didn't really work for me. And because in primary school I had been friends with guys, I thought high school was going to be the same. It's not the same, because when you believe that they're your friends and then other people are reacting to something that you think is normal. If I grew up and guys were closer to me than girls, and now girls are starting to get jealous because I'm closer to guy friends than they are to them, it's like, oh well, you can't chill with us because now that's basically the case. And then the guys is like, well, we see you as a friend, but you know, that's it. So it's kind of, it was just long. I'm gonna read from my phone what I wrote. Yeah, I had always felt different, but in high school that feeling intensified. I didn't like boys enough to date them like all the other girls, and even if I did like one, I'd suppressed it because it was drilled into me that I went to school to study and not for boyfriends. One boy even told me that I must be a lesbian because I didn't respond to him flirting. That stuck with me again, because why would somebody say something that basically wasn't true? I didn't understand that people in their own rejection and self-defense will say things to you because they're trying to justify your actions based on how they feel. I didn't know what that was. So he basically projected his rejection onto me. It led me to believe that no one would ever like me in that capacity for who I was because I wasn't feminine enough. I liked sports. I preferred to wear trousers, and I always was in trainers, and I didn't really like heels much. I remembered when I was writing this, I was like, one time in primary school, I actually did tell one of my guy friends, I was like, yeah, like I actually like you. He told me he didn't feel the same. I'm like, okay, fair enough, like I'm cool. But my female friend, she was white by the way, just to give context, she went and started dating him like the next week. And I'm like, so you encouraged me to tell this guy that I liked him? Bear in mind, we had no business like, what could you feel at, how old was he? Like 10. What is love at 10? But I didn't know that. So yeah, I'm thinking, why would you come and now backstab me like this? And so from then on, I'm like, everyone around me basically can't be trusted. So that, like, I didn't realize how much it traumatized me, and that's why we've been delivered, praise the Lord. I didn't tell anybody anything, because I'm like, all you're gonna do is take that information and go after what I want, or just basically make me feel that I'm not good enough to have the things that I desire. So I'm just gonna hush up and do it myself. So that rejection combined with now boredom, because I was at school, like, because of the routine I told you, like, life is now monotonous and I'm just doing my work, I'm watching Disney Channel, and that's literally it. We're not even going to church anymore at this point. Like, everything's dry. We're doing school until life starts, even though the fact that you're breathing, your life has already started. Like, you're doing it now. There's no point where you're going to get to and be like, yeah, now my life is going to start. Your life has already started. Don't let anyone fool you into believing that you have to get to a certain point to live your life. Live it now. So yeah, I started researching online about how to be more feminine, how to be more desirable, how to be liked by people, because I am very straightforward, straight talking, and that sometimes it was received as rudeness or not being able to have emotion or no fun and basically a stick in the mud, even though that's far from like me. Listen, we not even go into that, but that's just not who I am, but I believe that's who I was because of what people had told me. So I'm like, yeah, let me go online, let me do what these people say to be more desirable, to be more liked, to be more feminine, to be like everybody else apart from myself. The internet's the internet, so you're clicking, and before I knew it, I'd accessed pornography sites. Out of interest, I'm like, oh, like, what is this? Because I'd never had, it was here and there, but I'd never been sat down by my parents and had the conversation. This is how you recreate life. This is what sex is. This is what your body's probably experiencing. This is what you do with those feelings. This is what you don't do. And this is all because God says XYZ. Not to awaken love before its time, because this is what it leads to. It was never that. It was a very much every man for themselves. They were going through a lot at the time. They were very stressed. Like I said, I grew up getting used to highly stressed situations. I didn't know what stress-free was. Now trying to fit in, I thought it would relieve some of that stress. Stumbling across pornography and feeling some type of stimulation, I'm now thinking, yeah, like this is going to be a way for me to relax, calm, and now that I'm relaxed, I can relax into this new person and have people now accept me. Didn't work. It was gratification for like the duration of the video. I'm like, yeah, but at the back of your mind you always know that it's wrong, but because your flesh is strong and your spirit is weak, at those times where you have to make the decision and you make the wrong one, you're now strengthening your flesh and your spirit is weakening. And because light and darkness cannot dwell in the same place, God can reach you, but only if you let him in. At that point, I hadn't. So I kept going. When just watching no longer worked, I progressed onto masturbation because the people in the video were doing it, and you think, oh, they're doing it, so like what you're watching, you know, it says you are what you eat. So what you're watching, what you're feeling into your heart, that's what you become. So I'm like, I have to do this because these women are giving the men what they want and both parties are happy. So it's like, let me learn how to do this too. This is the way to go. It's not the way to go, but this is my trail of thought at the time. I also did some research on how addiction forms because this went on for months, and I now created a new habit, a form of addiction, like just the way people could be addicted to drugs, people are addicted to sugar. I was now addicted to these acts. How does an addiction actually affect the brain? So after some research, it says the human brain is wired to reward us when we do something pleasurable. Exercising, eating, and other pleasurable behaviors directly linked to our health and survival trigger release of the neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine is basically, it's like they call it the feel-good drug that your body produces. This not only makes us feel good, but it encourages us to keep doing what we're doing. It teaches our brain to repeat the behavior. So me doing this for months is teaching my brain to react in a certain way, and it tells me this is good, keep going, because of the way it makes you feel after. The high after, not when you've fallen and the high is finished. Like your brain is telling you, like, this peak, we want to stay at this peak, and the longer you want to stay at this peak, so you have to do the act longer, so the peak is higher for longer. Then afterwards, so someone with withdrawal symptoms feels absolutely terrible, depressed, despondent, and physically ill. That's how I would basically feel every time I was finished. I felt dirty, I felt empty, but at this point it's like, what is actually wrong with me? Because now I can't stop, even though I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I have the inability to stop myself. And that thought was depressing because it's like my body, this one that houses everything that I am, is not even my own. It's one thing being homeless, but being homeless in your own body, there's no feeling like that. There's nothing that compares. Even though my parents have put limits on the computer, I found ways around them. like I said before, like when the boys had introduced to games, like I loved games. It's the act of solving problems, finding clues, putting it together to progress, that I like. That me airbending around these computer limits that my parents had put on almost felt like a challenge. It's like my reward was watching pornography, because I'm like, yeah, I've airbended, I deserve to now. Do you see how like these toxic thoughts have now, everything is geared towards this, and now there's basically nothing, it takes priority now. And then even when, if I couldn't get around the computer, like these times now, when I got my first iPhone, I'm like, yeah, I'll just use my phone, because obviously on data, like, even I never had any data. Do you see what I mean? Like, you will do anything to get what you want. And at this point, I had given Satan the permission to use myself against myself. He used my gift of finding information against myself. He used my highly driven desire to reach for information, study against me. So now I was going above and beyond for something that just wasn't healthy, like in any way. It's evil. It affected the way I interacted with people. I couldn't hug anyone. I didn't hug anyone for a very long time, and people started to get offended when I didn't hug them back, because if your language is physical touch and I wouldn't hug you or show affection in any way, like, it could be taken personally, when really it had nothing to do with them, it's everything to do with me. And the idea of touching people or looking people in the eye, anything personal, I couldn't do it. And I think, even looking back, that really destroyed relationships that I did have, because I was like, nah, like, you're not going to get into my mind and understand what's going on, because all you're going to do, remember I told you about that girl in primary school with that boy that I told him, all you're going to do is take the information and use it against me. You're going to judge me, you're going to do all this different stuff. It was always me, and that's how you know, like, everything like this is not God-centered, because instead of it being about you pouring into other people, all you do is think about yourself and what you need and what you don't need. It's always just about you. It's about self, and self is pride, and pride is what got Satan kicked out of heaven. Like, his chest was puffed, and without knowing it, all you're living in pride and ignorance. The way how my thoughts were now transported into paranoia, to the point where I thought if I hug people or look at people in their eye or around them long enough, I will transfer all my bad habits and everything evil onto them, or they're gonna suss me out. I don't know what like, that's what I honestly thought. Like, I thought I was out here just infecting everyone, transferring, and just like I'd make people miserable like how I was miserable. So I just stayed away from people, to the point where even when we did start going, like, we found a church home, and I still go to that church now, I would even skip the communion, because I was like, nah, if I drink this, say like, yeah, Jesus died for me, it's spitting in his face, because it's like, yeah, you died for me to come and play the fool, basically. And I honestly thought at some point, like, I was gonna drop dead if I kept drinking that, because shortly after in the scripture it says, like, if you do this, like, I'm paraphrasing, but basically if you do it with a wrong intention, or like not pure in heart, like, it's causing damnation to yourself. So I'm like, fam, I'm actually gonna drop dead because of what I'm doing, like, behind closed doors. Like, I genuinely thought like I was gonna die, so I even skipped that, stopped doing that. Amongst that, like, family stuff was going on as well. In conjunction with everything, it just came to a head, like, I just felt ugly, overlooked, and useless. And those feelings are nothing to do with God. No, Jesus never spoke that over me. My situation and other people and even me had spoken that over me. And that pushes you further into the darkness, because it's almost like there's a noose around your neck and your body, and those words pull you more into darkness. The depression, it snuck up on me, and before I knew it, I couldn't see positivity, light in absolutely anything. Like, I wrote this down, that's kind of like a journal entry, but I didn't think I'd be able to articulate myself either without stuttering or without crying, so I wrote it down. I'm just going to read it from here. I said, I think the darkest point was when I experienced sleep paralysis and torment for months. Maybe months at a time, but across the span of maybe 2 years, from I think maybe 18 to 20, age 18 to 20. It was always between the hours of 12 and 4 a.m. Now knowing what I know now, those are called, I think it's witching hours, when demonic activity is basically at its peak. I had no idea what that was, but now I know. I would see black smoke in my room. I would hear sneering and laughing. I was strangled in my sleep, held in my bed, like on my forehead, my neck, over my mouth. Like I'd feel like, you know, when you take your whole entire arm and press it on the width of your chest, I'd feel like heavy weights on my chest, and like someone was pressing me down. And I'd also feel my ankles being cuffed and held for, like, after that, for months. I didn't sleep on my back because I felt like it's like I'm inviting demons to like come and squish me. I would hurdle myself and sweat in the summer underneath my duvet, because in like an armadillo fetus position, because I'm like, I can't, it's like hiding, but obviously you can't hide, so that's my form of hiding. Like if I huddle up enough, I can't be pressed down in a ball shape. So that's how I slept like that for months and years after. I screamed but no words would come out. Tears would run down my face and demons would laugh in my ears. I used to see the most graphic, abusive and sexual dreams that felt so real. I'd wake up in cold sweats crying because I was grateful that it was only a dream, but it felt so real. It was at this point I felt dead inside. I would lay awake at night and wait for sunrise to go to sleep because I knew nothing could happen in the daylight. I was petrified of the dark, again as I'd been as a child. I knew I had opened the door to demons because of the pornography, but I felt so stuck because I couldn't stop. It was a toxic, destructive, and it numbs your senses and isolates you, and is completely anti-God. I say anti-God because it produces the opposite of what is considered the fruits of the spirit. So there's no self-control, there's no peace, there's like everything that is listed is basically the opposite, and that's what it produces. One memory I had is I woke up and I was crying because I had woken up. I was so upset that God hadn't taken me, that I saw sunrise. I'd woken up, I'd miraculously got through the night and I'd woken up, and that made me sad because I didn't want to be here anymore. I was so sick of how stuck I was. My life was basically, in my eyes, meaningless because I woke up to waste time and go back to sleep. I ate and gave myself energy to waste time, waste my thought space. My mind was occupied on nothing good. I don't even know how I got through education. Only the grace of God. I honestly don't have, because now I barely remember, because God has been so good. I remember points of turning to God, but I don't actually remember like the level of pain, because now I can talk about it, but before I would never have been able. This never crossed my mind, like I was taking this to the grave. It just wasn't going to happen. I knew that I needed help, but I had never felt further from God in my entire life. To say I didn't know God was an understatement, because I knew, like, you know of somebody and everything that they've done, but they have no connection to you. Like, you can read an autobiography of a celebrity and feel like you know them because you know their story or what they told you or what you've heard, but you don't know them. You don't live with them, and it's one-sided. You know them, but they don't know you. And that's how I felt about God. Even though he's not human and his love is past any human capacity to understand, I felt like God didn't want to hear from me because I had spent so much time wasting the breath that he basically given me. So I was like, well, if I die, that's it. Like, I don't even know what will happen if I die. That's how hopeless I felt. I said, there'll be the inkling, like, you hope you get to heaven, but deep down you know, like, I ain't finna make it, because look at my track record. Yeah, I spent most of my nights crying because I didn't know why I was alive. I remember one time I had a vision of me, like, just floating over my own funeral, like kind of an out of body experience. And like, I don't even know what to say about that. It's because of how low I felt. I'm like, yeah, well, at least someone feels something for my existence. Like, I just remember, like, bare crying and sobbing, maybe because of how young I was at the time. I don't know the reason, but it's like, yeah, you felt something now, but I'm here in real life and no one basically cares what you care after I'm dead. Like, that's how messed up my mind was about the concept of love and relationship. I was like, you want people to feel something, but as a result of your death, like, that's so, that's evil and prideful, and that's basically, it's like, it's just Satan, innit? Like, even from, so it was when it was at its heaviest until I was about 21, and even when I turned 22, like 22, when I started trying to serve in church more, I thought that my good acts and serving in church would wipe my slate clean and basically even the scales with God. If you know God, you know that's not how it works. But like I said, because I didn't, I was like, yeah, I'll do all this stuff and it will basically, like, even God will accept me, and then we can try and do this. When he would have accepted me at the beginning, he'd already accepted me, but I hadn't accepted him. I remember one day I came home. I think it had finally hit me, because these times I haven't said anything. I'd never been overly emotional anyway, but I was always the one that people came to. I didn't go to people. So I'd built up years of stress, years of anxiety, years of secrets, years of lies, years of trauma, just years of negativity. And I came home one day and I broke down. And like, when I say broke down, like, I literally, like, I felt like my body actually broke. Like, I was just in the middle of my floor and I was just on my back prostrate and I was just crying, and I was just like, God, like, I'm here and you're all the way, like, up there. Why? And I listed things, and I said, you said, it says in this, like, I began memorizing scriptures through stories. I'm very story orientated, so I like biblical stories in a visual concept. So I'm like, you did this for Moses, you done this with Elijah, this with Elisha, this with Daniel, this with Joseph. I'm reeling them. I'm like, you done all this stuff, but you can't see me here, a heaping, blubbering mess. Why won't you basically help me? And I literally, he was like, because you didn't let me. And it seems so simple, but I was like, but you're Lord of everything. You don't need my permission, but God is a gentleman. He won't force you into doing anything unless you let him. Like, God wants you to want him. Just because he is God, it doesn't mean, like, everyone is going to accept him. And so I lay on my back and I was like, I said the salvation prayer, accepted Lord, like Jesus to be Lord of my life. That's basically when the healing began. Bruh, like, even now I'm just like, God, like, like, the patient that God has had with me is remarkable. Like, I don't think you don't understand. God's patience is what I aspire to have. Like, that, for me, that's what I'm working on. Like, you know, there's one aspect of God, like, just will leave your mind blowing. Like, all that, me is patience, because I just don't understand how. I don't understand how. And the fact that, even the mere fact that I don't understand how, pulls me to God more. Because I'm like, I will never fully understand you. And that's like the biggest challenge. But it's a challenge that I've accepted. I'm like, yeah, like, but there will never be a peak in God that never gets higher. So when it was the sexual sin peak, I'm like, it gets to like the first time you ever experience it, that's the highest it will ever be. With God, there's no limit. Like, you can reach God and then get higher and higher and higher and higher, and you will still never reach, because he is God and we are humans. And that to me is like one of the most beautiful things that I've ever been exposed to in my life. I'm not gonna set myself off, but that is, for me, that was it. Let me not kid you, this is one of the hardest journeys that I've been on in my entire life, because it's undoing years of the wrong thing. Like, you know how they say, like, it takes, how long does it take to break a habit? But this something, when you've had a habit for years, and breaking it in like 2 weeks, like, unless it's miraculous, but it's always the work afterwards that's gonna be like, it's hard. It's not, it's being simple but still being hard is very real. Even in the beginning, I flopped so many times, but God kept picking me up and dusting me off and encouraging me to start again. At one point, I was angry with God because he kept loving me when I felt unlovable. He took time to speak and explain things to me, which is also something I didn't grow up with, having people explain things to me, because I was a child and didn't need to understand, when really and truly I needed to understand, because that's just the way my mind works. Very logical, and I like to know, even if the explanation was for my level of understanding. Like, I didn't need to know the ins and outs, but enough. But like, when you're not explained anything, you go seeking for the answers yourself, and we all know where that got me. So I looked in the wrong place. If I'd just opened my Bible, I'd have found it. But like I said, that wasn't taught to be my first response. And even if it was, it didn't go, it just went through in one in, out through the other. And he respected me as the individual that he made me. Even though he made me and could do whatever he wanted, he still respected who I actually was. And he never took giftings and talents back, no matter how much I begged him and I told him that he had made a mistake because I didn't deserve them. Hogwash, because God knew who I was going to be, the mistakes I was going to make, and he still decided, yes, she needs that. She needs to be good at this. She's got to be able to do this. And I'm like, brethren, you've made a mistake. You've seen what I've done with them. So why now are you not taking them and giving me a new set? Like, reset the deck. I don't need all this. I don't care. I didn't care much for the prophetic. I didn't care. Like, I just didn't care, because I don't business being able to discern what's going on. I don't business speaking into other people's life and mine looks like this. These times, all I had to do was speak into my own life. It seems so simple now. At the time, I was like, I didn't understand. Like, when you don't understand, that's where the devil will keep you, where you don't understand. Because when you don't understand, you don't know who you are. And when you don't know who you are, he can run rampant. But when you know and you understand, plan mash up. Like, there's nothing he can tell you. Like, yeah, you're a liar and your mum's a goat, so like, don't chat to me, innit? But at the time, I didn't know any of that. But obviously, God saw me through all my tantrums and was like, yeah, when you're done, let's carry on. Like I said, the patience is what grabbed me. I said Jesus was different from anything that I had ever experienced. He stayed with me when my friends and family left me and grew tired of me. Like, Jesus actually saved my life. And the same way I was incapable of control before, it's the same incapability that I have of ever turning my back on Jesus. Like, Jesus is now the ride or die. So I will never, listen, me, Rihanna, yeah, is following Jesus for the rest of her life. And nothing ain't ever going to change that. It's point blank, period. I can say that proud in my chest. I could scream it. Obviously, I've got neighbours that don't want me shouting up the place, but I could. It just makes me smile. Like, God just is. That being said, I didn't want this video to just me be rambling about my experience without offering a lending hand on. So I did some research about how it is that you break addictions or break a habit. First thing I put is into breaking a habit is self-care. and reducing your stress levels. When I say self-care, I mean taking care of yourself, because before, when you were doing all this stuff, you weren't taking care of yourself. Self-care is a form of self-love. Jesus said is love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord God with all your heart. To be able to do those things, self-care comes into that. If you wouldn't treat someone else how you've been treating yourself, you know that it needs to go. I wouldn't dream of treating anyone how I treated myself back then. It doesn't compute, never intentionally. I also researched and it says sleep deprivation stops the brain cells firing properly, changing how we see the world. Rest keeps good habits strong and helps to break the bad ones because you're able to think clearly. It also allows your body to heal. This is why the sleep paralysis was so dangerous for me, because it was used as a strong tool for the enemy to keep me bound. Me not being able to sleep was the devil clouding my judgment constantly and not being able to see the errors of my ways. And that's why I am a strong advocate for rest. Just know I'm anti-stress. Like, I'm not, because when you're put in a stressful situation, that's when you get desperate. And all that hard work that you've begun to do gets undone because you're now desperate, highly stressed, and resort back to your old ways, because it's self-care and sleep is one of the first things. This, of course, is after you've repented. So you repent first and you make daily steps to ensure that you have truly turned away. When the Bible says you literally turn away from your sin's over here, and you turn away, you're literally looking at Jesus and everything that comes with him. And he says, rest in me. So that's over there, and this is what you're looking towards, and sleep just helps you to do that. Number 2 is know your cues, know your triggers, and how to stop or eliminate or just avoid them if they're beyond your control. Like, you can't always control like what comes on the radio, but to avoid it, you can not listen to the same radio station. Do you know what I mean? So removing these means you're less likely to be put in a compromising situation you are not yet prepared for. It also gives you time to remember your goal of breaking the cycle. For me, I had to stop listening to certain music like I used to love. Like, these times I don't remember, it was 21 Questions by 50 Cent. I was like, yeah, me? Come on, rave. And then you're thinking like, but the whole aura of the song is just not kosher. And when you start to deep lyrics and all them things and the mood that you notice yourself in when the song is done, like, you don't need that. So me, that was out. Essentially, like, people call it cold turkey, but I essentially went cold turkey because I was determined. I didn't watch movies above PG for about a year and a half. Even I said 12 was pushing it, because the way that even the media world is pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable and what isn't. I didn't even feel safe watching 12s, because everything, whether it be songs, even like sometimes even people like kissing, showing affection, like I can't even. I said that was not going to show up in a family PG movie outside the context of like, or just like mom and dad like pecking or something like that. Like I couldn't hack past that, so I didn't watch movies over PG. And some of you might feel like it's extreme, but I was serious. It was a matter of life and death, so I was like, I don't have a choice, so I did what was necessary. Number 3, I put you need to replace your bad habits and trigger responses with new positive ones. So if you've been in a stressful situation, like there's positive stress, like wanting to do well in exams. That's a form of positive stress when managed correctly. But if you get too stressed and wind yourself up, you resort to relieving that stress as quick as possible, and you just might forget about what you're trying to avoid. So if you replace those bad habits with new ones, so for me, when I'm stressed, I play music, I flip out a notepad and I just design something, or I draw something. I actually sing. Like, I'm not the best singer, but sometimes I just like to sing. Just like positive, I'm not like, forget the new agey, like positive as in, it says focus on things that are good and pure. And so good and pure hearted songs, like I'll sing those, listen to worship, reading and researching about cooking, food, things I like and that are wholesome, I will research, or look into learning a new skill or pick up where I left off, like things like that. So I'm so distracted, and I'm relieved my stress that I forget about pornography being a first response. Like, you don't need that, and the more you do that, the more distant that negative response is to you, and then you just forget about it completely. The two songs that I really clung onto was, I think it's My Steps Are Ordered by Fred Hammond. I clung onto that with my whole entire chest, because even when I learnt to drive, I would drive back and forth to uni. Like, my first uni experience was dreadful. I would blast that song driving home, with like literally having to blink fast so the tears would fall so I would be able to drive. But I clung onto that song because I'm like, God, you know how hard this is, and I trust that you're going to guide me on what to do next. And another song was Kurt Franklin, My Life Is In Your Hands, because I was like, my life is not my own. When I thought it was my own, it still wasn't even my own, because I was a slave to my body. The fact that now I had now taken that same life and given it to Christ, there's basically nothing that he would do to hurt me. And holding on to that, believing that God had my life and that I believed in him to do the best, because he is the best choice for my life, and having faith in him that he can do the transformation that he told me about and showed me in scripture. That song really just reminded me of that and kept me going. I'm also going to put some scriptures that I held onto in the description below, but a story, like I say story, but the scriptures surrounding Jesus being tempted and not giving in, about how good God is and his patience. And I would read over the fruits of the Spirit again and again. I'm like, I want this. So I'd read it over again. I'm like, if this is not it, I don't want it. Reading the scripture about Jesus being tempted reminded me that me being tempted to revert wasn't the sin. It was carrying out the action that was actually the sin. If Jesus was perfect and was still tempted, me being tempted wasn't the sin. The reading over that scripture really helped me, and watching it in things like, say, Superbook, or just real life recreations of the story, like Miracle Maker. I was not my temptation, and that was Satan trying to revert me back to darkness, but it just wasn't going to run. Another way to solidify your breaking of this habit is write down or remember the reason for quitting. People like have made vision boards, and they're looking at it like, this is what I want, and every decision I make in my daily life is towards this goal. Every decision that I was making in my life was towards being delivered from this sexual sin, being delivered and free and walking in my freedom. That was my goal. My constant reason was to live a life and make decisions that were pleasing to God and everything to give him glory. I was also determined to break the generational curses, so those who came after me, like say like new siblings or my children, children's children, all them things, like the generation after, even other people's children, I was exposing it and not passing it down. Like, that's not the legacy I want to leave. That I was determined. I was like, there's no way on this planet that my children are going to experience this level of pain. It's not happening. Also add accountability into this one as well. They can also remind you of your good reason or good reasons of why you're doing this, and encourage you to keep going. Being surrounded with godly people, people that know your goals and push you towards that goal, the goal of cleanliness, godliness, holiness, really does help. I would really encourage you to confide in someone that you trust. I had people that I trusted around me, but because I hadn't been healed from the trauma of telling people stuff like that, girl in primary school and different things I'd seen in the family, the shame ate me up for so long that I was like, if I tell anyone, they're going to use it against me. But it's only God why I'm able to keep going. Like, there's no other reason. But I'd say confide in someone that you trust, or even like preferably someone mature, spiritually mature. I would say mature in age, but some people that are older are not spiritually mature. Usually they're in correlation with each other, But I encourage you, someone that's spiritually mature and someone you admire, and if someone has shared their testimony of this and you're trying to be where they are now, they're free, ask them, tell them. I'll leave my Instagram and my email below if anyone wants to send a message who needs encouragement through this, because it's rough. I'm not going to pretend like, yeah, it's easy, like I'm on the other side now, but when I was in it, walking it out daily, and I'm still walking it out, it just gets easier. It's mad, and it has psychological effects if you don't keep them in check. But I also researched what God intended sex to be and intimacy, and what that actually means biblically. Sex is actually a sacred act of worship to be enjoyed in the context of marriage between a man and a woman to become one, and it mirrors the intimacy that we must have with God. So like, I think the word is echad, to be joined in one. And I'd say the last thing is to be patient and to forgive yourself. If you don't forgive yourself for what you did in ignorance, it will continue to hinder you and you will continue to hold on to the shame. I hated myself for a very long time, to the point where I felt like I deserved to be miserable. I couldn't even look myself in the mirror a lot of the time, because I'm like, there's nothing worth looking at, is how I felt. I had to relearn what love was, and obviously God is love, we know that now. I had to relearn what that was and what that meant, and I had to learn how to treat myself how I would treat one of my friends. Because if it says love your neighbor as yourself, I wouldn't dream of telling my friend that she's ugly, or I just wouldn't do it. Be friends with yourself. If you don't even like yourself, that's techie, like it's a sticky one. So you have to forgive yourself and relearn how to love yourself again. And with that, loving yourself, you can learn to be patient with yourself through this process, because you're undoing, well, for me, it was a case of undoing years of habits and trauma. Some people might be only a few months in. Stop now. If it's even longer, then I'd say what I was experiencing, like, now's the time to stop and turn away and try to overcome this. And the last thing I'd say is trust that God can actually help you through this. You will always fail if you try to do it in your own strength. At the beginning, I was like, yeah, I'll get myself together and then I'll ask God what to do next, when in reality I needed him every day, every hour, every minute, every second of the day. I still do now, just in a different capacity. And I had to trust that he was helping me and let him help me. It was one thing to know that you need help, it's something different to accept the help. Really hold on to those, because now we're in the global situation that we're in. I don't know about other areas of the world, but London is still in lockdown. And the first lockdown is when I basically started to crack after nearly 2 years. And I felt the depression hovering over, because it's like, yeah, you thought you were strong enough, but I caught you again. And I didn't let it rest. God yoinked me right out of that, and I had to snap out of it. And I was like, Bridget, this is not who you are, and this isn't going to hold you back. Stop letting it hold you back. To the point where I thought I didn't even deserve different opportunities, because I'm like, you're acting trash. Like, you're acting trash. You're not. Those things are trash. You are not the trash. That's basically me and what God has done for me, and why I am now walking with Jesus. And the fact that he's done it for me, he can do it for you. I will leave the salvation prayer. If anyone doesn't know Christ and you'd like to make him Lord and Saviour of your life, because you've got to a point where you feel like you can't hack it anymore, like what I did, and you can read it and accept Jesus into your life. Some people cry, some people have emotions, but just know that even if you don't feel anything, it's the faith to believe, and it's a decision that you make and walk out daily. You might not feel any different, but accepting Jesus into your life is the best thing that you can ever do. And I can say that with full confidence because I know the God I serve, and he loves you more than life itself. And I can say that because Jesus gave his life, because he loves you more than his own life. That is it. I hope you guys, even if you made it to the end, you're a real one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this even helps. Everyone always says that I hope it helps one person, but if it actually only helps one person, I have done the job that God gave me today. I would love to keep in contact with you guys. My Instagram is Rihanna Siobhan. I'll leave it down below as well, so you can click through. Comment down below anything else that you'd like me to talk about, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.